Dames en heren, vrienden, welkom van harte bij deze bijzondere sessie vanavond. Bijzonder in de zin omdat we een Nederlandse vertaling van het tweede boek van Alan Morinis mogen aankondigen. En een special welcome to Alan, of course, who will share with us a short shiur this evening. Zoals u wellicht weet, heeft Alan inmiddels 4 boeken geschreven. De eerste, toen ik met hem kennis maakte, Climbing Jacob's Ladder, Everyday Holiness, Everyday Holiday and With Heart in Mind. En deze laatste is ook weer vertaald door Henri Vogel. Voordat we naar Alan gaan luisteren, wilde ik kort 3 personen aan het woord laten. Op de eerste plaats Henri Vogel, de vertaler zelf eventjes. Daarna rabbijn Menachem Sebbag en daarna rabbijn Joram Rookmaaker. Henri, mag ik het woord aan jou geven?
Dankjewel, Daniel. Is het een bezwaar als ik in het Engels even begin? Ik denk dat de meesten verstaan het wel. En degenen die het niet verstaan, daar zal ik het nog wel eventjes voor vertalen. I would like to express my gratefulness to the many people who made this possible. Of course, in the first place, my dear wife, who is not among us anymore, but I'm sure she's watching from above. And that's also what I really hope, because I miss her terribly. And of course, Alan, for allowing me to translate this beautiful book into Dutch, which is of course, in Dutch is of course a very small language area. Of course, without you, this book would never have happened. I also want to say special thanks to my son and daughter-in-law, Alan and Rachela, who helped tremendously during this difficult period after Marga passed away. And without them, I would not have known where I would be today. Yeah, it's incredible what they did for me. And so also special thanks for you. And of course, the publisher who corrected whatever went wrong in my writings. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. And also, of course, special thanks to our sponsors who made it possible that this book is here today. The book is dedicated to Pirkei Avot, Spreuken der Vaderen. En dat is bij de meesten, denk ik, allemaal wel bekend. En het bevat 48 relatief korte hoofdstukjes die op zich ieder zeer diepe gedachte laten zien. Alles is gericht op het worden van de beste versie van jezelf. Het zijn korte hoofdstukjes, maar uiteindelijk gaat het er allemaal om dat je het je eigendom maakt en dat je op deze manier je bewustzijn verhoogt op wat je allemaal aan het doen bent. En als je naar de kaft kijkt, dan zie je op de kaft 48 poortjes staan. En als je naar die kaft, als je het vlak zou leggen, maar dat raad ik je niet aan, want dan beschadig je waarschijnlijk het boek. Ja, dan zie je een soort verdrijvingsvak ontstaan wat je op de weg vindt als ze willen dat je naar een bepaalde rijbaan wordt gedirigeerd. En dit boek doet dat ongeveer ook. Ja, het is gewoon het probeert je mensen op de goede weg te sturen. En daarom vraagt het ook niet zomaar even dit boek te lezen, maar diepgaand te bestuderen. En dat is ook de bedoeling dat we met het boek aan het werk gaan, want het is niet een roman. Maar je kan er heel veel van opsteken, denk ik. En het is zelfs levensveranderend. En om een en ander diepgaand te bestuderen, gaan we ook binnenkort weer van start met het bestuderen ervan in kleine hoofdstukjes, in kleine groepjes. En dat doen we dan met 1 hoofdstuk per maand. En degenen die daarin geïnteresseerd zijn, die kunnen zich uiteraard bij Daniel of bij mij melden. En dan gaan we kijken hoe we de groepen kunnen samenstellen. En dan geef ik nu graag het woord terug aan Daniel om Menachem aan het woord te laten.
Ja, dankjewel Henri. Nu wil ik graag even het woord geven aan rabbijn Sebbag.
Dankjewel Daniel. Is het de bedoeling dat ik in het Engels spreek of in het Nederlands?
Engels is prima, denk ik.
Okay, so I will switch to English. Let me start, of course, by wishing a very warm mazel tov to you, Alan. Having a book that you have written that you are not able to read must be very special. But the work that Henri has done to translate it, he says it's a very small group, but it's actually a very thirsty group, and there's very little literature in Dutch. And every book that we get in a language that we can read easily and that speaks to the soul is of enormous value to the Jewish community here in the Netherlands. And we're very grateful for you for writing the book and the content. And of course, very, very grateful to Henri for taking the enormous time and effort and energy to translate it into a language. Although most people here in Holland do speak English, when reading in one's own language and what one is used to, you know, there's always an extra dimension that is sometimes missed when reading in a foreign language. So thank you, Henri. Thank you so much for taking the time and the energy to get this done. And of course, I would also like to mention your dear wife, Marga, who I dedicated my introduction to, Margalit Bat Yoel, because we know that she was not only the driving force behind you, but the driving force behind the whole Musa movement here in the Netherlands. And to be quite honest with you, I would not be involved in anything to do with the Musa movement were it not for Marga, may her soul rest in peace, because I remember very clearly the first time you all came to my office, I was clearly prepared to tell you, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to get involved. And I even actually started saying that, but Marga wouldn't take no for an answer. So it's, and I thank her retroactively for not letting me off the hook, because I have enjoyed the process that you have pulled me into very, very much. Let me just share a very small thought that hit me very strongly just from the title of the book, immediately hit me very, very strongly. And let me dedicate this to the memory of Margalit Bat Yoel. Immediately when reading the title of the book, Van Hoofd tot Hart, the two words that are mentioned in there is the mind and the heart. Those are two central parts of the human being. And there's been a generation-long discussion about which of these two is actually more important. If we look into Mishlei, and Mishlei is obviously the Musa movement's handbook, because in the first chapter of Mishlei is where Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, actually introduces the concept of Musar and Musar Haskel and Shma B'ni Musar Avicha. He actually mentions the word Musar 3 or 4 times in the first few verses of his book. If we look into the third chapter, he actually, I think, is addressing this dilemma of generations between the mind and the heart. When he starts off by saying, B'ni, Torati al tishkach u'mitzvotai yatzur libecha. Do not forget my learning and keep my mitzvot. And he promises us, Orech yamim u'shnot chaim v'shalom yosifu lach. If you keep all these principles, I promise you, you'll have a good life, peace, and happiness. Chesed va'emet al ya'azvucha. You will always have truth and justice. Time tie them to your throats, write them upon the boards of your heart. U'metzachein v'seichel tov bein Elohim v'adam. What we say in Birkat Hamazon, v'nimtzachein v'seichel tov. What we ask for is chein and seichel tov. He promises us we will find favor and goodwill in the eyes of God and in the eyes of man. And then he tells us, B'tachel Hashem b'chol libecha ve'el binatcha al tisha'en. Trust in God with all your heart and do not rely on your mind. So after he has put down very clearly what generations before him in the Torah has been put down very clearly. The mind is important. Learning is important. Following the words of the Torah and finding depth and meaning in the learning, which is an intellectual process, is so important. He then immediately says, B'tachel Hashem b'chol libecha, do not forget to trust in God with all of your heart. Ve'el binatcha al tisha'en, do not rely ultimately only on your mind. So we see here that Shlomo HaMelech is trying to warn us, King Solomon is warning us not to be too reliant on our minds and on our thought process, which is that differentiates between us and the animal kingdom. But do not forget that the heart and the emotion and the soul and the feeling is something that has to be taken with us during the whole process of development of the human being. So this learning, this intellectual process, the brain, the mind, which was given to us as a special gift above the animal kingdom, is so important to be able to understand. But libcha, your heart, in which you internalize those thoughts, in which the emotion takes over and processes those intellectual processes, is just as important. And a shiluv, a joining of these two aspects, is very, very important. And that will result in v'nimtzachein v'seichel tov. You will find favor and goodwill in the eyes of God and people. And we see that whole dilemma and that whole contradiction already very early on in the words of the Torah. If we look, for example, at the mitzvah of tefillin, of putting phylacteries on every morning, then we see that they are tied, ukshatam la'ot al yadecha, tie them on the top of your arms towards the heart, and the other one is put upon the brain, upon the mind, because the heart and the mind have to work in a synchronized fashion in order to be able to achieve what it is that we need to achieve as human beings. And it was very interesting when I was looking at these 48 Musar lessons and how they're so beautifully delved into, and the depth, and then at the end the practical process about how to put it and make it actual within your lives. It just hit me for a second that 48 is memchet, is the numerical value of the word moach, which means brain. But what you might not have noticed is that after you have moach, the very next number is 49, which is a symbolically important number in Judaism. After you have spent those 48 levels of exercising the mind in the wisdom of it, you get to 49. And 49 is the numerical value of Lev Tov. Lev is 32 and Tov is 17. Together it's 49. So when you get to the 49th level, you surpass the mental ability to connect with the words, and you get a Lev Tov, your heart, which is a piece of meat, changes into a Lev Tov, into a good heart, which is actually the ultimate of what we are trying to achieve. And as the Gemara tells us, as the Medrash tells us, that the first letter of the Torah is a Beit and the last letter is a Lamed. If you put those two words together, you get Lev, you get heart. Just when the Torah, which is an intellectual process, which is a book full of rules and regulations, which is there to exercise our minds, once we have gone through the exercising of the mind, we must never forget, as the Gemara says, Rahman Ali Babai, that without attaching the heart to the mental process, we are actually have an empty shell. And if we only have the heart and no mental process, we are emotional beings, and then we are equal to the animal kingdom. And that beautiful combination of joining the mind to the heart and the heart to the mind, and making sure that they work in a very important synchronization in which they fulfill each other. And sometimes, let me be honest with you, the mind needs to take control and do a little bit more work. And sometimes we have to forget about the logic and just follow our hearts. And finding a good synchronization with that is actually what Judaism is all about. And it's what learning Torah and experiencing Judaism is actually all about. And this book is such a beautiful way of taking these 48 levels, which are actually just 48 different pathways in which we can join our thought and our feelings. And I'm so happy that this is translated into Dutch, so that the Dutch Jewish community and the Dutch community in general and as a whole will be able to read through this and experience that beautiful shiluv, that beautiful joining of mind and soul, of heart and body. And that will, it's going to be unique, it's going to be wonderful. And I thank you from the depth of my heart, both you, Henri and Alan, for making this possible to us. Yasher kochachem, thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Rabbi Sebbag. Now I would like to give the opportunity to Rabbi Joram Rookmaaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morinis, Alan, Henri, Daniel, my much appreciated colleague Rav Menachem. In the memory of Marga Vogel, Zichronah Livracha, I would like to share a few thoughts also. And people who know me know that I very much support all efforts to make Judaism a tachlis, a practical way of living, instead of an abstract series of incomprehensible rituals. And I believe deeply that we need many such publications in the Netherlands in order to show and share the diversity of present-day Jewish thought and practice. And also, therefore, I'm grateful to Henri and Daniel for their enthusiasm for the project and for spreading the ideas of Musar in the Netherlands and beyond. I read the original after Daniel asked me to write an introduction to the book. Frankly speaking, I wasn't, Daniel and me cross each other every now and then when we were sitting in the Jewish elderly home in Beit Shalom, where I'm teaching a class, and then when I leave, Daniel's teaching a class, as some of you here present. And actually, I must admit, I never really sat in the class, but my mother does, who is also present here. So, in this, the family is involved in this Musar affair, let's say. In reading the book, the 19th method intrigued me very much. Let's say, just beyond Chai. It says limiting pleasure. In Dutch, genot beperken. Especially in the process of deepening the meaning of our lives, we can, I believe, certainly have fun. Enjoying things, the beauty of the world around us, the love of our neighbors, what we achieved in the quest of life. And Alan Morinis interprets the Talmud Yerushalmi when he says, on the day of judgment, everyone will be held accountable for every permitted object that he could have enjoyed in his life, but he did not do. A statement that will certainly appeal to many. The great thing when I was reading this, and I was wondering, how do I think about limiting pleasure? I'm studying often, working hard, I would like to sometimes to not limit, maybe increase pleasure every now and then. But then, luckily, the great thing is that the Talmud Yerushalmi can also be read as Rabbi Cohen said in the name of Rav, on the day of judgment, everyone will be held accountable for everything that his eyes saw, but he did not enjoy. Rabbi Elazar made sure that he always had small change in his pocket so that he could buy any type of fruit once a year. That is the sentence that comes after. Our commentators point out that every time you eat a type of fruit for the first time in the year, it provides an opportunity to pronounce a bracha, a blessing, thereby acknowledging the Eternal One and showing gratitude for exactly what we have. That moment of awareness, some call it mindfulness, but let's put it in the Jewish context. That moment of awareness brings enormous joy that I certainly wouldn't want to do without. So indeed, sometimes we do good to limit pleasure to a certain degree, but we also celebrate the creation every time we enjoy what is around us and acknowledge the beauty of it. So I certainly hope that we and you all can enjoy a lot of beauty by reading this book and by living Judaism in a tachlis, practical way. Kol hakavod, Alan, Daniel, Henri.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Before I would transfer the microphone and the camera to Alan, I would like to invite the listeners that if you have a question,
you see Rav Menachem keep having our picture in the middle of Jerusalem, you know.
Okay.
By the way, so sorry, Daniel.
Please, if you have any questions during Alan's shiur, type them in the chat box, and at the end of the shiur, I will just try to grab a few questions, put them to Alan, and so he can answer. I cannot guarantee that he will answer all your questions, but he will do his best. Okay, Alan, please.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Dank je wel. And to everyone, because you're showing me great honor by conducting this gathering in English, which is probably I'm the only one who doesn't speak Dutch, and so you're definitely doing me a favor to make it possible for me to understand, and I appreciate that. And I want to thank everyone who played a role in bringing this event together and also creating the foundation of Musar study and practice in Europe, into which I am coming, and I'm very appreciative. And like everyone, I have to, from my heart, acknowledge Marga, who is here and whose hand is here. And when Rav Menachem described his inability to say no to Marga, anybody who knows Marga knows that experience very, very well. She was a force of nature and a force of Judaism and a force of humanity who I learned so much from and I benefited so much from. And it's a great gift to have her blessing in my life. And so I really know that she's here, and she's certainly here in Henri. And I have to say now that I must write another book because I have to keep Henri busy. You know, without Marga to keep him busy, I'm feeling a little bit of responsibility. And so I think another book needs to come very soon. What brought me into this, how this book came about. It's the fourth book I've written in the area of Musar. And my own journey began with a very, very personal quest, because my life had reached a point. I was 47 years old. The first 47 years of my life had gone very, very, very well, really graced and blessed. And when I was 47, I had real difficulties come to my life. And I know all of you will be able to relate to that, because at some point in life, that's what happens. Life gets difficult at some point. And that was my point. And I thought to myself, I was very fortunate, whether I thought to myself or I received a thought, min hashamayim, coming from heaven, that my difficulties were not uniquely my own, that the challenge of being a human being and the challenge of facing the tests that come to us in life are something that's part of everybody's life and have been part of every generation. And I was born a Jew, but I was not born to an observant Jewish family. And so I didn't have a lot of background or understanding to draw on, just as our two rabbis, today drew on Jewish teachings, on the Talmud, on gematria, on different sources. I didn't have that. And I started myself on a search. So it was very personal. It was really from the heart. My heart was very pained. My heart was, to a certain extent, broken. And from that place, I was motivated to go out on a search. And I came through my own life into contact with the Musar tradition, and that started a process which led to writing books, well, especially before that, to finding a teacher for myself, Rabbi Yechiel Yitzchak Per, Shlita, and the journey began. And that journey led me deeper into the Jewish tradition in a very practical, and as Rav Joram said, in a tachlis way. I didn't realize tachlis was a Dutch word also, but in a very tachlis way, it sounds like Dutch. It could be Dutch as far as my ear is concerned. But it led me in a very tachlis way into the Jewish tradition, and it began to change my life. And it changed my life profoundly, and that's so much why I began to write and share what I had found, because most of the people, all the people really around me, knew nothing about what I was exploring, which is a whole interesting discussion. But it started as a journey of the heart, but it then turned into also a journey of the mind, because our Jewish tradition has a great gift for us, which is that so much of the wisdom of the tradition has been written down and is there for study, and it requires study, and it requires real concentration and application of mind and a great deal of engagement to be able to take out from the tradition what is valuable in a tachlis way to us in our lives. And inevitably, Rav Menachem mentioned Mishle as being a great source of Musar, and it is probably the fundamental source in terms of where the word comes from and the word is used and the concept arises. But it wasn't that long after that that Pirkei Avot came along, and Pirkei Avot is also a tremendous book of Musar when it's seen through a Musar lens. And so in my studies and in my journey, it brought me to Pirkei Avot. And it was my own thinking about it that I thought, what is Pirkei Avot? In English, it's translated usually as chapters of the fathers. And I think I heard, if I say it right, Henri say, Sproken der Vaderen. Is that close enough? You know what I mean? Okay, I'm trying. Maybe next time I'll do the whole thing in Dutch, but...
Your Dutch is excellent.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. I got marks from my teacher. The point is that Vaderen, which shows up in the translation of the Hebrew Avot, is, I would go so far as to say, likely a mistake. It's not a correct translation. The source of Pirkei Avot is one volume of the Mishnah. And after the writing of the Torah and the compilation of the Torah, the next significant piece of writing in the Jewish tradition was the Mishnah, which was the rabbis' attempts to create out of the Torah a handbook for really a code of law, principally a code of law. And the Mishnah was put together in the early years of the Common Era, so probably finished around 200 of the Common Era. And it really is a code of Jewish law, the first of that kind. Pirkei Avot is very different from anything else in the Mishnah because it's not about Jewish law. So the whole Mishnah is really devoted to Jewish law, and all these other elements, which were really of a different kind, which were really ethical and principles for living and guidance for how to be a human being and lists of things that are good and lists of things that are not good in a life and that sort of thing, they all got put into Pirkei Avot. But when we remember that the people who put it together were legal scholars, those are the rabbis of the Mishnah. They were principally legal scholars. We can look and see that the word av in Hebrew has a legalistic meaning. The word av, which is literally fathers, but in a legal sense, it means first principle or first cause, the source of something, the thing out of which everything else flows. So that, for example, on Shabbat, we have 39 Av Melachot, the fathers of labor, the primary categories of labor that are prohibited on Shabbat. In the case of Tuma, pollution, which is a biblical concept that we no longer practice, but the idea was that certain things like a corpse or a dead rodent or certain things could cause a kind of pollution which could be transmitted from one person or one thing to another. But the first cause, the thing that initiated this pollution, was called Av HaTuma, the Av. And you find other concepts like that where the word Av is used as a notion of first principles. The whole idea of what Pirkei Avot is changes radically when you change the interpretation of the title. Because if it means Sproken der Vaderen, it means the chapters of the fathers, it's just something from long ago. What's the good of this book? It's old. That's why we should pay attention to this book. It's old. It comes from our fathers, our ancestors, the patriarchs. It's from way back. That's what its value is. But if it's understood as chapters of first principles, these are the source ideas that make human life work. And if you look at the collection in Pirkei Avot of what's brought there, you'll see that that's exactly what it is. It is a collection of teachings which talk about the essential elements that go into a human life, both the positive, the things that you should do, and the negative, the things that get in the way of a spiritual life moving in a positive direction. So when we have Pirkei Avot, what we have to study is something that will give enormous guidance. It will shed much light on our lives, because this is not something from the time of the Vaderen. This is from the essence of what human life is. These are the basic principles of human life. And so with that in mind, as my study continued, I saw how valuable that was. What a handbook. The Jewish teachings of the basic principles of human life. And there are 6 chapters in Pirkei Avot. The first 5 are the original chapters, and later a 6th chapter was added, and the focus of the 6th chapter particularly is Torah. And the 6th chapter, there is one Mishnah, which is like a section, and that's the whole basis for this wonderful book that, I'm not praising the book as wonderful in itself, the wonderful translation that Henri has brought to my brothers and sisters in the Netherlands and opened the door to this. In the 6th chapter, the 6th Mishnah is the 48 methods for the acquisition of Torah, how you acquire Torah. And I just want to say a little bit to introduce it and talk about one of these methods. Rav Joram spoke about one of these methods. I'll speak about one of these methods. Immediately, this Mishnah caught my attention for 2 reasons. One, there was the great Musar yeshiva of the 19th century in Lithuania was called Kelm. And in Kelm, the yeshiva of Kelm, the Talmud Torah of Kelm, in the period of the counting of the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot, which is 49 days, they would study this chapter, this section of Pirkei Avot, which is 48 methods for the acquisition of Torah, and they would study each of these methods, one per day, on this march between Pesach and Shavuot. And the last day was a review. And that actually brought my attention to this particular chapter, because I was interested in their methodology and I practiced it myself. What also caught my attention was that it doesn't say learning Torah, it says kinyan haTorah, to acquire Torah. That's interesting. And when you look at the 48 methods, what you see is that the first of the 48 is Talmud, which means learning. And then there are 47 more. In other words, learning is very significant. Learning comes first, but there are 47 other pathways. There are 47 other directions one needs to pay attention to on this journey. On this journey to do what? To acquire Torah, not to learn Torah. That's 1 out of 48. To acquire Torah. It took me a long time, a lot of contemplation to appreciate the difference between those two things, because our world in general and our Jewish world in particular are very oriented towards the intellectual, the ideas, the knowledge in the head. And what Pirkei Avot in chapter 6.6 is telling us is, yes, you do need to learn. The leading step is learning. And then there needs to be these other processes that take what you've learned and bring it from the head down into becoming part of your living being, part of the definition of who you are, part of your very structure internally, which is what the heart is. So much more than just the emotional center, really the core, the essence of who you are as a human being. So the ideas become embodied and embedded in who you are. And there was a great Musar teacher who died in 1970, Rabbi Elia Lopian, who defined Musar as making the heart understand what the mind knows. You start with the learning, but you don't stop with the learning. From the learning comes this embodying, this internalization of these principles. One of them, I'll pick out one, which is called Nosei Ba'ol Im Chavero. And this is one of the chapters, one of the sections, one of the 48. By the way, if you count in the Mishnah, you'll come up with 52. There are 52. So Pirkei Avot says there are 48 methods for the acquisition of Torah. Here's 52. As a result, there is not consistency in what 48 there are, and you'll find different lists. They have to join a few of them together, and that leads to a certain amount of variation. Nosei ba'ol im chavero means bearing the burden. Nosei ba'ol, carrying the yoke, like an animal wears when it's pulling a wagon or a plow. Nosei ba'ol im chavero, with your friend. Bearing the burden with your friend. Your friend, there is someone around you right now who is bearing a burden. Somebody is burdened. It could be an emotional burden. It could be a financial burden. It could be a health burden. Look at what's going on in our world today. Who is not burdened by some of the challenges? I attended an online Shiva yesterday in England. I wouldn't have gone, but the brother of the person who died is in Boston, couldn't go to his own brother's funeral. And he had to attend by Zoom because there's no flights between the United States, and in this case, it was England, but it could have been Europe as well. There are burdens. It's so burdensome. And here we have a principle dating back about 2,000 years, which gives us guidance for living. And it says, if we want to acquire the benefits and the wisdom and the light of Torah, if we want to fulfill what Judaism says is our purpose, one of the methods, one of the pathways we should be following and looking out for is, what burden do you see that somebody else has? Don't take it off them. It's not your burden. But nosei ba'ol im chavero. Help your friend carry their burden with them. That's tachlis. There's the tachlis. There's where it comes down to being something that our rabbis wrote. It was put together around 200, so almost 2,000 years ago. And their lives were very different from ours, but the principles are the same. And so I just really have to honor Henri for opening up these principles to you, as I said, my Dutch brothers and sisters, in your language. There's a song in Hebrew that says, Ein li eretz acheret, Ein li eretz acheret. I have no other land. And the next line is Rak mila ivrit choderet. Only a Hebrew word penetrates. When you learn something in your native tongue, it penetrates like nothing else. No other language can do that. And when we're talking about acquiring Torah, it has to penetrate. And so I really honor Henri for making it possible, to creating the drill that will drill down and allow the wisdom of the Torah to penetrate your heart so that you can become a greater embodiment of the tremendous light and wisdom and holiness that is our inheritance from the Torah. I wish you well.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I really enjoyed your shiur, but also the shiurim and the words by both rabbis. So we are very grateful for the three of you. I would like to, to give the opportunity to people to ask some questions, but to my great surprise, nobody filed a question, which is very unusual. So either everything is so clear and so deeply penetrating in each heart that nobody had the opportunity to type in a question. If there is someone anyway who wants to, just raise up your hand. I will unmute you. You can still ask your question if you want to.
Ik zie Evelien.
Ja, Evelien? Je moet even unmuten.
Okay. Sorry. I don't have a question. I was listening to you and enjoying what you're telling. What I study in the summer is Roof and Bulka, the Pirkei Avot. It's very much Musar like, and I want to share that with you.
If I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Bulka is also a Canadian.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's in Ottawa. So, you know, we Canadians and the Dutch, we have a very, very special bond, and it's very strong. And so it's interesting you're studying a book of Pirkei Avot in Holland that was commentated. The commentator is a Canadian. I like that.
It's oh, you have it too, yeah. I gave it to you, Harry.
Okay.
But you see, again, the translation of the title is not that helpful for the needs of the present moment. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things which are old, and that's not necessarily their greatest value. It's not bad. There's something good about it. But when you really think of what the word avot means in Jewish legal terms, and know that the mission was written by legal scholars, so they knew what they were saying when they chose avot, I think it is much more powerful in terms of speaking to the contemporary world, whether that contemporary world was in 1500 or 2100. It's our contemporary world. These are the first principles, and I think that brings the book to life in a much more significant and useful tachlis kind of way.
Okay. Then I have a personal question, Alan, if I may. It's just while writing the book and, covering these 48 pathways, there are a few probably that just flow out of your pen as if, someone is inspiring you and it went without any problems. But maybe just one or two really give you a hard time, like, I cannot penetrate with. Could you share that with us, please?
Well, Rav Joram mentioned limiting pleasure. That's a good one to start with, because it seems life does its own job of limiting my pleasure. Why do I have to practice that? Life is hard enough. But, it's a question of sometimes things like that. Your first impression isn't the deepest truth, and you have to stay with the question and keep thinking about it and experimenting with it to go deeper. And that's a good example. In that same section, there's a section of these 48 principles which talk about limiting all sorts of things, limiting sleep.
Yeah.
One of the 48 methods is limiting sleep. Now, I don't have any trouble limiting sleep. I wish I could sleep more. I get up at 5:30 in the morning, no matter what. And another one is limiting laughter. And again, I find that this world is so challenging, in some ways so dark, that when I find something that is, of good humor, of a good kind, I'm eager for it. I often thought about, I use a lot of humor in my teaching generally. And so I have acquired a lot of stories which make the point, but do it often with humor, because humor helps, we were talking about penetrating the heart. A good, funny story gets into your heart so much better than somebody who gives you all the facts of the matter. And so I've often thought, one day I'll publish a book of funny Jewish spiritual stories. And it says limit laughter. And so all those were really challenging for me, and I had to really work at it. And I think, just to summarize, that's again the gift that the tradition gives us in providing us with these 48 methods. Some of them are right for some people, and some of them are right for other people. Not necessarily the ones easily to you are the ones that are the biggest gifts to you, because when you find one that is difficult for you, that may be the one which you can get the greatest understanding through being involved with. But beyond that, that's the one that may cause you to grow more.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question?
Maybe I want to say something else.
Okay.
The book, as you have seen it here, is readily available in any bookshop in Holland. Yeah, so you go ahead, and I hope you enjoy the book, because it took such a lot of pleasure for me. It was a lot of pleasure for me to translate the book. It was difficult at times, yeah, because how do you get the right tone? And then Marga helped me, and then we discussed it. And actually, when I sent it to the publisher 2 weeks before Marga passed, and we had no clue that would happen. So she said, I'm so happy now we'll have more time together. Yeah. And that's and it's for me it was a wonderful job to do. Yeah, and I thank you for joining us tonight, because it's you're on the other side of the world. Yeah, we have 9 hours difference. Yeah, and our day is ending, and your day is just at midday.
It's lunchtime.
Yeah. and we have to go to bed.
Okay. Well, any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Janneke Krijger. We have a small group in which we are reading now holiness in the daily life.
Everyday holiness.
Everyday holiness. And then we take a chapter every week, which is quite a lot. Can you give us an advice how to read your book? Because when you study all the chapters, then you feel you are not finished. It is not penetrated enough in your heart, and you can continue. But on the other hand, you like to remain, to stay more by the text. Can you give us a hint?
Right. It's a very good question, because as I quoted Rabbi Lopian saying that Musar is making the heart understand what the mind knows, It's not something you do by decision. You don't make a decision and say, okay, now my heart will understand that. That doesn't penetrate the heart. What penetrates the heart is other methodologies. You have to take the learning and practice it in different ways. And that's where humor comes in too, in the same way, that you can make the point in another way, but the humor helps to penetrate. Emotion helps to penetrate. Experience helps to penetrate. Stories help to penetrate. I began my talk by talking about how I myself reached a point in my life, which was a difficult point when I was 47 years old. I know when I talk about my personal story, people are listening because everyone's relating to it in terms of their own personal story. And ever since we've been, as human beings, sitting around the campfire in the forest, people have been telling stories and they've been meaningful to other people. I would say two things, and one going back also to Hart with Heart in Mind. One is, there's no need to do the book as quickly as you are. That's the first piece of guidance I would give you. Slow down. If you feel you're going too fast and it's incomplete and so on, your own process is giving you an answer. Slow down. There's a great Musar book written in Amsterdam, Mesil Isharim, The Path of the Just, written by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, published in 1740. And when I was in Amsterdam and we went to the Eitz Chaim library, and the librarian handed me the book and said, this is the first edition from 1740 of Mesil Isharim. I almost didn't want to take it in my hand, but on the other hand, I very much wanted to take it in my hand. It said that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who led the Musar movement in the mid-19th centuries, spent 9 years going through that book the first time. I studied Duties of the Heart, Chovot HaLevavot. It took me 2 years to go through that book the first time. So number one is to slow down. And the second point is, I don't know what the structure of your group is. If you have a leader in your group, no, okay, you don't have a leader in the group. You don't need a leader. A leader is a helpful thing, so you might want to twist Daniel's arm. But if not, what you can do is each of you can take a turn being the leader. And what that means is the person who is leading the next session reads over a part of that chapter, and prepares some questions or a discussion or an exercise, so that they've given it thought in advance, and they're going to lead you somewhere relating to their own tachlis journey. And so those are two suggestions that I think could make a very big difference. Either, number one, slow down. Number two, give yourself leadership or find a leader. I think it won't be ideal, it won't solve all the problems, but it'll put you onto a much better track. And in regard to this book, what I would suggest is 48 chapters lends itself to 1 per week. And then you go through the book in a year, basically. And so that's also a very good thing that's available for people to do as a kind of practice to use these and to work with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're almost coming to a close. Anybody with a last urgent question?
I just put my email address on the chat. So anybody who has a question that they didn't feel to ask in a large group, sometimes people have a personal question or something they still would like to ask. So please, by all means, you can email me personally. I'm happy to share whatever I can offer.
Okay. Thank you again, Alan. Okay, thank you all the people who registered, all the people who participated today in this special occasion. Now I have some announcements, like you can call it commercials, but it's about the book. since the book has been published, it's readily available in most bookstores, I guess, or Amazon or ball.com, wherever it's available. And you're invited to buy one. The second remark is, in fact, a general answer to the question Jan Krijger just put. There are a number of groups that have tried and wrestled for themselves. We offer from the Musser Europe Institute to help you to facilitate the group, the best way to do things. It's always, you know, a way of finding. Alan just reminded me of what I call my romantic period of Musser in the beginning, when there was no institute, there was only Alan, and he gave us, you know, like every 2 weeks there was a text, and we studied it, and there were no Malchim, there were no leaders. We just, as you said, we took turns. You had to, there was no other option. There were no Malchim, there were no facilitators, we did it. So I'm very grateful for that period, because that was the period when I learned most of how to do with the things. We do it once a week, was too fast. We do it, you know, in 2 weeks, was too fast. Then we found out for the group, you know, once a month, that's it was serious time to get in, you know, to give the midah, in this case, or the method, enough time to settle down, or to get from your head into your heart. Anyway, you're welcome, everybody. You can always send us an email to the Musser Institute if you have questions. We are really happy to help you to start a new group or to join a group. There are about 5 or 6 already in Holland at the moment. So please feel free. And any questions, if you forget to write down Alan's email address, you can always ask us, and we will gladly forward it to Alan, and you can ask your questions. Okay, again, thank you very much for this.
Can you write your email address, Daniel?
Yes, we will do it. Send it to everyone who registered today, and we will send it to you. Okay?
Bye-bye, yeah.
Okay. Well, this concludes our meeting for today, and I hope to meet you maybe at the next book. I forgot to ask the title of this book of Jewish.
Life is funny.
Great.
Alan, is it going to be on joy and humor and enjoying life?
At this moment, it's just an idea. What I'm working on right now, much more intensively, is the study of Kedusha, the study of holiness. That's really that is my current project. Maybe the humor book will come at some point.
Joy is very important.
Have fun. Okay. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.